allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Copies of draft minutes. Copies of draft meeting minutes for September 17th have been provided to you and are also posted on the city website for anyone who's interested. The treasurer's report as of August 31st and September 30th are located in a binder at City Hall in the hallway and also uploaded to the city website for review. Committee reports are on your desks. We begin. First order of business is a resolution appointing 246 Commissioner of Deeds. Do I have an introduction? And a second. Second resolution, authorize the city to apply to the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation for a tree inventory community forest management plan grant. Hilary, would you like to describe this to us? Or
Certainly. In the past, we've had a tree inventory grant, and that was in '07. And that was the last professional tree inventory that was done for the city of Hudson, and it was just on street trees. This is an opportunity to get a grant for not only inventorying all of the street trees, their health, their approximate age and their species and everything about them, the size of their tree pits, and also pointing out where any tree areas are missing trees or have dying trees. Not only that, this inventory would also this time include all of the city-managed park forestry. So the cemetery, the Charles Williams, there's some caveats there, and all of the city parks except for the Furgery and Promenade Hill, because Promenade Hill and the Furgery are included in the DRI. And the caveat I was saying about Charles Williams is because it's mostly a park of fields. There's some segment with planted trees, and their trails. So areas like that, the inventory would only include significant trees within 10 feet of the trails, and or if there's any trees that are dangerous to the public. So that's how the tree inventory aspect would go. The grant is also is for a tree management plan. So not only getting all that information and getting it on a GIS format for DPW and for anybody in the city to access, it would be come with a tree management plan for multi-years, not just immediate things to take care of in 1 year. It would be for a 5-year, 8-year, 10-year. And the advantage of that is being very conscious of our trees, and what we have is this big asset, being being able to budget both money and labor for taking care of what we have. And also each year we get more trees. We are probably, well, we asked, this is coming from the CAC, but we want the city of Hudson to be the applicant. I will do 90% of the legwork on all of this, and the CAC members and proofreading and everything we need to do to prepare the grant. And then the Hudson Parks Conservancy has also agreed to be a partner on this, so that there will be follow-up going forward after, hopefully we get the grant, we get the inventory, because we also need to make a commitment not just to maintain our urban forestry, but to maintain this document and keep it up to date. So I'll be also wanting to go to the DPW meeting and speak with everybody there. And I'm probably also going to ask for, there's one park in the city where the land actually belongs to the county, and that is Courthouse Square Park, and that one, it behooves us, it looks good on the application, and also behooves us anyway, to engage with the county and the county DPW and make sure that they are not only want that information, but will work with that information also and write a letter of support also.
Thank you.
So Oakdale included, Hillary?
I'm sorry?
Oakdale Park included?
Oh yes, Oakdale is included, and the same thing as with Charles Williams. We're going to make sure that every play area is taken care of, but the dense woods, that's unwieldy, but we'll make sure any area that's and within 10 or 20 feet. I need to go and scope that out really carefully, because I understand there's a new teaching platform that was built in the woods. I want to make sure that we get enough of the perimeter around that so that it's safe.
Thank you.
And what about the ravines? There is Underhill, on the other side of Oakdale. So is the focus primarily where the trees are on the city property?
City, it has to be, it can't be state or private property. It can be city or county. One thing that I was given the hint of when I was talking with the people from DEC, I did a tour of the city with a DEC forester last week during that rainstorm. And one thing he said, gave a hint at, because he can't give exact direction, he said, careful not to overreach if it's a dense forestry. So I think it's wonderful. I think they applaud that there's dense forestry in the city, but if it's not in the areas where it can either, unless they're dangerous trees that we know of, then we could have them declared dangerous by a professional forester. That would be important, but it doesn't cover the ravine.
Okay, thank you.
Tiffany, your question?
Once the trees that are identified that are dying, that includes removal?
No, the grant would just be for the identification and the database about all of the trees. It would be incumbent on the city to take action and do the removal. There are grants that we could go for in the future if we wanted tree maintenance grants, and that can help with maybe ravines and maybe tree removal. But this one is focused on tree inventory and then a maintenance plan for long-term maintenance plan.
I should add that the Conservation Advisory Commission has sort of identified trees as their next concern after having finished the NRI, the Natural Resources Inventory, and we'll be focusing on trees for probably the next year or so, right?
Probably.
Thank you, Hillary.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, another question.
Oh, it's a no-match grant.
Oh, bonus.
Sold.
You want?
Yeah, there is a program, Galvin Foundation donating trees, going to be,
I'm sorry.
there's a program like a Galvin Foundation, and there's a tea program, you give a tree or something on the pond side.
Right.
Yeah, what's that? Is going to match up with that or no? You guys?
Oh, all of those trees that are planted this year and that were planted last year will be included in the inventory. But you make a good point that when we do more plantings in the future, after we have hopefully this inventory, we need to make sure that as those are planted, we add them in and get them on the same schedule. One can also get tree planting grants from the DEC. We have been fortunate to have grants from others like the Galvin Foundation and have a lot of new trees, and we'll have a lot more planted in the next week or two.
Thank you. Can I have an introduction? Rich. And a second. What's that?
I was asking, I was asking Alderman Dewan here, the program that he mentioned with the Galvin Foundation, I was asking, is that the same program that the organization Operation Unite does when they are planting trees and so forth?
I don't think so.
I think Operation Unite, they just do the flowers but the Galvin Foundation and with DPW will cut a square out of the sidewalk and plant the tree. And I believe those forms are available through DPW on the website, but you just fill out a form. Property owners fill out a form, and then DPW, probably not now in the wintertime, but in the spring, there's a process that goes through the CAC, I believe, and then DPW does the cutout of the sidewalk, and will plant the tree. Right.
The next resolution authorizes payment for real property reevaluation services for the 2019 tax year. This is, I believe, the last money paid to GAR.
They had to go to the hospital. Go figure.
Do I have any questions? Do I have an introduction?
No, but is this an error, or is this really a hospitalization?
So that's one.
I know. That's the insurance file.
That to the assessor and other expenses from hospitalization,
yeah.
not to hospitalization.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
There we go.
There we go.
An introduction?
There goes my phone.
And this just, finishes the amount that contractually we're obliged to pay.
Correct.
Okay.
Eileen? Second? John?
Who seconded it?
John Dolan.
Excuse me a second. The next resolution authorizes the city to accept a grant for $100,000 for a truck study. Let's see. It was part of our annual AIM payments, and this just allows us to amend the budget. It does not involve actually how we're going to do it yet.
Has there been any talk about,
Yeah.
preliminary talk about?
Yes, but nothing official. I mean, the next stage will be to write an RFP,
Yeah.
and that's what's at issue. I mean, not now, but will be, perhaps. Do I have an introduction or any more questions first? An introduction? John? Second? No. And the last resolution, I'm sorry, what? Calvin. This, we've had this for a little bit now to read and digest. This is a resolution authorizing, and if you haven't, I really do hope you'll read it. What?
You said we've had this?
Yeah, I sent it to everybody.
Okay.
Quite a while ago, actually. I could resend, well, I don't have to resend
No,
it.
no. It's-
But in any case, you have a week to look it over again, or
Okay.
for the first time. This is a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute a settlement agreement with the federal government under the ADA, American with Disabilities Act. By the way, Eileen, do you have, has this gone before the DPW?
I don't believe so,
We
no.
talked about it.
We talked,
Rob talked
we had
about
heard
the
that
process.
there was, right, that there was a grant that Barrett had secured, or monies that.
We did it, we
had
know
secured.
No, this
The
is not
settlement.
the about.
Yeah,
Remember
Oh,
Rob?
88, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Rob
I'm
said
sorry,
he
sorry,
walked.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, it has.
she was on the truck study.
I'm sorry, what?
She was still on the truck.
Oh, okay. So it has been discussed, it has gone to committee. And you have it?
Yes.
Okay,
Or
great.
you-
Can I have an introduction? And a second. Go on. Okay, the proposed local law is still on your desk. Display all the source. And now, the public. I'm sorry, council. Old or new business? Anything from anyone on the council first? Rich?
The Friends of the Cemetery is doing an event this coming Saturday from 1 to 4. It's just we have an art display, we have some cider and donuts, and just another event, and it's another event in the cemetery. If you're more familiar with the cemetery, we're going to have a scavenger hunt, arts and crafts. It'll be fun to help raise money for flowers and other plantings that are going to be in the cemetery. So, yeah.
I'd like to also
Raffle.
now, oh, sorry.
That's it.
The BEA hearings continue. We've had sort of the first round more or less complete. You need to post the next group of meetings. A few of you have actually attended regularly, which I'm glad to see. They've been, for BEA meetings, they've been fairly well attended. The idea is to have every meeting listed on the city website with the subject within 24 hours previous to the actual meeting. So, you know, you can choose and pick which ones you want to listen to. The public, unless there's more from the council. Nick?
Can you talk any more about the settlement agreement with the ADA and what that means and what the repercussions of that are?
Well, I think it has a lot to it. Of course, as Dominic points out, one of the first things it involves is the mayor must appoint a ADA compliance officer, and that hasn't been done yet. There is also that compliance officer mainly, I believe, will be dealing with complaints. Because as Craig Hay mentioned, a lot of the ADA requirements are built into the building code. So they're all, for any, new buildings or anything like that, or renovated buildings, they're already being subject to ADA requirements. However, if you have a complaint, that's going to be the next that's what will be satisfied by this new compliance officer. So if you file a complaint, it has to go through a process. For those of us who recently took the sexual harassment test, one of the things that stood out about it was it's more about how you deal with complaints. You know, they can't get buried at any stage in the process. It has to be open, and everybody has to know what's going on. We're also going to be required to hire an architect who specializes in ADA compliance, and that architect will assess all city properties.
What, how does that, in terms of the mandated curb cuts for access, does the architect, I mean, because that says that has to be done within 30 days of the, so I'm reading this correctly? Of the
What, you mean this one here, the sidewalks?
curb
Yeah.
ramps and street level pedestrian, that stuff sounds
I
like.
know.
Yeah, so that's, we wait on the architect for that, or do we execute that?
I think it means we have to execute pretty fast. I think, I mean, you know, there are those who would suggest otherwise, that we can delay on some of these things.
Well, I mean, no, I mean, if this is
But I think
pretty
this makes it
straightforward.
pretty clear that we can't.
I agree.
So there's a section that covers implementation enforcement, and of course, also identifies the major areas that need to be dealt with in the city. City Hall, of course, the sidewalks and curb ramps throughout the city, the waterfront park. Those issues are mainly to do with the restrooms and the picnic tables. And then the Promenade Hill Park, of course, will be covered under the DRI renovation, which will completely make it ADA compliant at long last. And of course, the last two are Oakdale and the Youth Center, which have issues with ADA compliance. So those are the issues identified by the federal government in the settlement. Beyond that, you know, that'll be subject to the anybody who complains about an ADA non-compliance.
Well,
Yes.
I mean, well, like for instance here, that F-19, it says, beginning 30 days after the effective date of this agreement, whenever Hudson constructs or alters a street road or highway or street level pedestrian sidewalk, it will provide curb ramps at any intersection. So I guess, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, and also existing. So they have to update things
That'll
immediately.
certainly mean
Planned and current.
the connectivity project in the DRI
So,
will
yeah,
certainly also
that's the scope.
be completely ADA compliant. I mean, that's understood by
Right.
the,
So does this mean that Rob scoped the cost of this stuff immediately for this?
say that again?
Does this mean that the DPW scoped the cost of the stuff for the immediate execution of?
Irene, do you know?
No.
Sorry.
No, my guess would be no.
That's
I
okay.
mean, I don't-
My question.
Yes, he probably
Yeah,
does
like a
from
ballpark.
some of the work that they've done on sidewalks, and they have done curb cuts and some of the ramp issues, but I don't know how we're going to pay for all of this.
Well, what, the sidewalk part or the other?
No, the compliance in total.
Well, fortunately,
That you have to do it.
portion of it is
Hmm?
covered by DRI money.
Right.
The
That's
City
the
Hall is
top up.
not,
This will be
Yeah.
immediate and will have to be out of the budget.
Yeah.
and the sidewalk project, the larger sidewalk project. And that's why I think John and the legal committee have been trying to come up with a fair and
Well, we have to meet with the treasurer to find out what kind of,
with the treasurer, and again with Rob, who may have the statistics we need to figure out some of the details.
I think he did, based on some work they've already done on Warren Street, he has some parameters, but we are looking for the DRI work to help us know
Right.
what's immediate, what can wait, what has to be replaced, what can be repaired.
And if it's a
But-
bonded project, it'll be an outside
Yeah,
contractor,
yeah,
not DPW.
right.
City Hall, I'm sorry, 1 second, Donna. City Hall, we've seen the 4 proposals, and it speaks for itself. Donna, did you want to say something?
Yeah, so part of the ADA training is a survey, and they have a survey template and workshop. So it would be, priority would be whatever's in the settlement, and, you know, would it be curb cuts? And identifying the curb cuts. I know Troy's going through it now. And then having a plan to remedy that. No, so it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be in 30 days, but it has to be a plan in place to remedy the situation.
So a survey, that's a lot of work to do in 30 days.
The plan is even in place.
Right.
You're right, so, and same thing with the ADA coordinator, you know, in the meanwhile, until there's compliance here in City Hall, it's what the ADA coordinator puts in place for access. Whether that's somebody, you know, calling and saying what we sort of have in place now, going to meetings, you know, relocating meetings, things like that, that all would fall under an ADA working with the grievance and complying with that grievance, moving that meeting until the building becomes access. So it really becomes a lot of work for the ADA coordinator to just establish the plan of each identified possible complaint.
Dominic, you might be able to answer this. If we put this through next week, how soon does the mayor have to have a compliance officer in place in order to then,
Where's the mayor?
well, Dominic might know, to then, I lost my thought. So once an ADA compliance officer is in place, then does the timeline begin? Or does it begin before then or after that?
Yeah, when's the clock start? With
That's
the
what I'm
exam?
trying
It says when this agreement is in place.
Right, which means he would have to do it pretty quickly.
30 days.
That's what I mean,
And
it's a
then,
very
excuse me a second,
tight.
and then we have to talk about whoever's appointed has to go get the training, right?
Well, that can all be part of, you know, the training can come here, but that could all be part of, you know, the process of the plan. You know, ADA coordinator, you know, in terms of, you know, the settlement, you know, these are stipulations and it's part of responding to the stipulations of how you're going to deal with A, B, and C. Now, it's not expected that the settlement is going to be done in you know, in 6 months or, you know, things like that, but it's expected that each issue here to be addressed with a plan and a timeline, you know, so it can be monitored. And if, you know, and where a lawsuit comes in place is that if one of these things aren't done and somebody complains again, or if there's an issue again, that's when there could be a lawsuit toward the
So
city.
just to clarify, I mean, it's pretty direct. It's explicit in the stipulation. It says 30 days of effective date. You're saying if we have an ADA compliance officer and they're doing a survey of these immediate identifiable, if there's a curb cut issue at intersection X, as long as there's a survey that's being done in that 30-day period, that's going to satisfy the stipulations.
Because now Troy had an ADA coordinator. There's been in, I think, 2 years now, and they're just approaching some surveys that should have been done when he was hired. So just because the nature of, you know, the beast in terms of trying to get this stuff done, how do you do that? You know, they're using volunteers. So, and that's the plan. That was the plan. They put it, you know, in terms of in a year we're going to do A, B, and C. So now they're in the part of doing the actual going in surveying all the areas in the city of Troy, utilizing volunteers. So you know, the ADA coordinator can be, I mean, technically legally should have been done a long time ago because of the compliance, but that can be done yesterday. You know, in terms of the appointment, it's just you figure out who that is currently in, you know, in the city that can be appointed because it has to be a city employee. So who can be appointed to this position, you know, to take on this role? Doesn't have to be.
Maybe it could be one of the individuals who made the complaint.
No, it has to be a city employee. You know, that is, it doesn't have to be hired for that position, but it has to be a city employee. Like I said, some use code enforcement, some uses the city clerk. It has to be, some have HR, some in DPW, so it has to be a city employee that can be identified and have all these complaints in place.
Thank you. Peter?
The plans that Thayer and Lacey did for this building, would the 3 less expensive ones that don't include an elevator, would those satisfy what this agreement is asking the city to do?
Have you looked at them? I'm not, you're not. Do you think they do? I don't know.
No, I don't know. I can't tell if would assume that we would need access to the second floor to be compliant, but I'm asking because I don't really know.
I don't think they do.
Okay,
I'm not an expert.
okay.
Ron?
I have a kind of follow-up related question. How does or just does not this plan dovetail with, as was said, several plans for the renovation of this building and/or the purchase of JLE? And what kind of timetable might there be for making whatever decisions this body would like to make? I also would like to ask if the council has officially been shown the 4 plans formally, for example, by the mayor.
We were eventually sent them, I believe, on, do you remember the date?
Last week.
Last Friday or last Monday. We can go Monday, we got the plans.
So then how does this, what impact does this have on your, the time you have to make a decision on which of those plans might
I
be
suspect
approved or
well, I
the
don't know.
purchase of the school?
Right. It is an interesting question in terms of the timeline and how that would work. I assume if we went ahead with JLE, that would speak to the government's demands, but I can't guarantee, I mean, who knows?
And that's only for this building, that's not for the entire city. Well, this use.
Is that right?
I may be wrong, but I may have wrongly assumed that all the 4 plans would have satisfied the federal government for this building.
I'm sure.
But I don't know for a fact, but I...
It was not satisfied. I mean, that's in the most minimal terms, let's put it that way. And it's not clear that they would be happy with that.
Okay.
I don't see how a call system from the outside box would satisfy.
Well, that, not that alone.
Right.
Let's say the
And a lift
lift,
to the first floor.
that would
The
not...
point is whether you want the entire building to meet ADA requirements and make it useful.
Well, I guess my question is, does the federal government require that, or what do they require?
I don't know.
I would say
They just identify the problem.
it is all about access to whatever government entity that's the public, general public has access to. So, I mean, technically, a call system, could satisfy something for the time being, why something's in place. But, for long term, it might not be something that's, desired for ADA compliant. So it's all about access. How you give an individual access today without construction. So if somebody comes in tomorrow and needs access, you have to have something in place for access.
So then could there be an interim, which would be temporarily satisfactory, which might be then replaced or augmented by a more, all-encompassing plan?
I assume that's one of the reasons we're required to get an architect.
Right.
To help make those decisions.
After those things are identified.
But these are all, right, these are all assumptions. I mean, we don't know what the government technically wants, definitely wants. There's just this one document.
And even before the intercom system, how were the people getting the attention that they needed from inside the building?
Good question. They would call ahead of time. That was
If
pretty.
they had phone.
Those.
So do we have, does the mayor have any information about this that we need to know of? Or do we have everything?
I don't know. I can't know that.
This agreement on the city website.
Okay.
Is this agreement available on the city website?
It is, it should be now. In today's, if not nowhere else on today's agenda, or, documents for today.
What is that?
And I guess, hopefully I hope by the next meeting, maybe we'll have some more
Here.
answers. I don't know.
I have a copy.
Maybe we
I have my
should
own.
have a special meeting with the mayor, because even though this is to enter an agreement, but that doesn't have anything, you can still appoint someone regardless.
I'm not following, I don't understand what you're saying.
Before this came about,
Right.
he can appoint someone regardless to the fact. And
Right.
being that, every time, since this has been aware to all of us, that's all we've been receiving is half information. So we hear that the mayor received it, none of us received it. You received it, you send it to us, we get other information. So maybe we should just have the mayor in front of us and have all the information that we need, and whether he's taking recommendations from us or something, because we're asking each other questions and none of us know the answers.
I do know that he received the plans from Lacey Thaler back in early August.
We didn't get it.
No, we did not. But any other questions? Nick?
Just in reading it a little more, it seems that some of these timelines are laid out in section F. But interestingly, F19, it seems like says after 30 days, any construction that's done, it's required, so it's like a non-compliant thing. You can't touch it
Yeah.
unless you make it ADA compliant. So that's going to be a significant cost for anything,
Yeah.
any work that's done.
No, I could be reading it wrong, but it sounds like whenever Hudson constructs or alters a street, road, highway, or street level, pedestrian walkway, sidewalk, it will provide curb ramps at an intersection having curbs and barriers. So, beginning 30 days after the effective date of this agreement. So when the city does alter a street, then it must comply.
He says for
Right,
future,
It's not you have to start everything from scratch. Whenever you touch something,
Right.
Right, whenever you do something new,
Right.
then it has to have the curb ramps in it. But I don't think it's saying that, as of right now, all the curb ramps have to go in. I think when a new street is done,
right.
whenever Hudson constructs or alters a street, then the curb ramps go in.
Right.
Well, the curbs are.
But technically,
right
anytime they're
now,
doing
you
it-
can't even get
Oh,
on.
yeah, anytime, yeah, sure.
Like if they just get a paver out there and someone sues, they trigger that.
Matt?
Yeah. In the private sector, compliance is only required if you do major alterations, and then you have to take an action. For example, in the public sector, when they really altered the courthouse, they put in access at the same time. So I was wondering if that's really, and also based on what they say about when you start a new road or something. Is that really the case with public buildings also?
No, they're under Title II. Public entities are under Title II.
It's a separate type.
It's a different title.
Yeah.
Private doesn't have it.
And it has a different requirement. Yeah. But in the case of roads, it seems not to.
I imagine you probably couldn't do a renovation of this building without taking that in consideration now. You couldn't
Right,
suddenly have a
exactly.
semi-public building and try
Right.
to deny access if the whole building is for government services, so.
Right. No, I would think if you do anything to the building, you have to make it compliant, more than changing the door or something like that.
Any more comment?
Motion to adjourn.
Second? Meeting's over. Please come up. I'm sorry, what?